Okay, guys, this is something that just came up not too long ago with one of my students, and I had to come to you about it. The question on the books is, can you write a book in 48 hours? Absolutely. Now, before you do that, we're going to go over number one, the tips and tricks, but I want to introduce myself to you. My name is T. Styles, and I write urban thriller books, and I also own and operate the Cartel Publications as well as the Elite Writers Academy. And what we do is we meet twice a month to teach people not how just to write the one book, but multiple books. Because if you're talking about a career where you're taking care of your families, one book is not going to be good enough. At some point, people are going to want to know what your next book is. So we teach people how to do that. What I also do is teach people how to find out what's necessary in regards to one step to the end step to actually complete your book. Okay? So this is what I do for a living. I've been doing this full time for many years, and I'm going to share some secrets with you, okay? So the question is, can you write a book in 48 hours? Yes, you can. I have written it before, but there are things that you need to do before you can even go there, okay? And we need to talk about those things first because I want to make sure that you are prepared for it. Okay, before you even start talking about writing a book for 48 hours, you need to know 6 things. And I teach my students this at the Elite Writers Academy. Number one, the reason you are writing your book. It's not enough to say, I want to write a book that's interesting. You have to say, I want to write a book based on a woman overcoming struggles with alcohol addiction. I want to write a book about a man who is working so hard that he forgets to spend time with his family. You need to have a reason because the reason will guide you throughout your story. You also need to know what your protagonist wants. Otherwise, what are we talking about? If you don't know what your protagonist wants, there is no story. So that's very important. Number 3, what are the things that are preventing your protagonist from getting what he or she wants? For instance, let's say your main character wants to get married, but she's rude. She doesn't know how to talk to people. Those are the traits that are preventing her from getting her goals. So you need to know those things up front. Number 4, what is the push out moment? Okay, think about it like this. If you don't have a push out of the window moment, your character can continue being, in the case I just said, continue talking disrespectfully to people, continue being rude to people, and nothing will change. But the push out of the window moment forces the protagonist to deal with his or her bullshit. So that is necessary to know before we talk about writing a book in 48 hours, people. Okay, number 5, using your hero's messy traits against you. You need to introduce your villain and you have to decide what the villain wants. Here's a tip. What the villain wants directly collides with what the protagonist wants. It's very important. Otherwise, where's the conflict? If your hero wants one thing and your villain wants one thing on another side of the planet and they don't collide, it's no conflict. So you need to know what your villain wants. 6, you need to make sure before we talk about 48 hours, at the end of your book, will the hero get what he or she wants, or will the hero just resolve his or her messy traits? Because here's the thing, when you're writing a story, the hero doesn't necessarily have to get his or her goal, but the messy traits have to be resolved. This is what happens when we're talking about an arc, and it's very important. So these questions must be answered before you can start talking about writing a book in 48 hours. But trust me, I know you can do it. I'm going to tell you how to do it. Once you got all of those things, the next thing you want is a support team. Now, I'm looking at it in my notes because, again, I've done this plenty of times. I want to make sure you guys, know every step. Once you answered all of those questions, number 1, you're going to need a support team. I know people. You feel like I don't need nobody but me. Okay. If it's going to be just you, you need to make sure that you have all your food, all your snacks, everything available, because you're going to be spending at least 12 hours each day writing on your book. 2 days, 12 hours. We say 48 hours, but we mean 2 days. So, but you're not going to be writing 24 hours each day. I know you don't want to. You're going to be actually writing less time, but you're going to need 2 days to do this. So even though you're writing for like 10 to 12 hours, the body has to relax. So we consider that a full day, people. So you're going to need all of your snacks and all of your food available, because you're not going to be leaving the house or your motel. I've done this in motels and everything, and it's been very successful for me. The next thing, you're going to need your supplies. Very important. You need a composition book and several gel tip pens. Now, the reason why I want you to write your book in a composition book is because the internet is hell. Meaning that if you're on your laptop, even if you're writing your book from your phone, you will get distracted. Listen, I've written over 90 books, and it's happened every time. Even for me, I do this for a living, and I'm telling you, you will get distracted. So avoid that by writing your book in a composition book using gel tip pens so that it can be smooth. You want to have more than one. Okay. Next thing you want to do is, you already answered your questions that we talked about. You already got your support team, and if you're doing it by yourself, you've gone grocery shopping and you got all your supplies, all your food and everything necessary. Number 3, you got your supplies, your composition book, and your gel tip pens. Next thing you don't want to do is schedule your writing time. When are you going to start writing? I say get up as early as possible. So if you normally get up at 8 o'clock, get up at 5 o'clock, get your coffee, get whatever you need to get into you, because you're going to be writing from 5 o'clock to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're going to be writing until about 5 o'clock. You need 10 to 12 hours of straight writing. What you do want to do, though, when you're writing, make sure you get up and give yourself some walking time. You don't want to be having aches or pains and this and that. You want to make sure that you're up and you're moving every hour. What I do is I use my Apple Watch. It dings at the 50-minute, at 12:50, 3:50, whatever. I get up and get to moving. That's actually also how I lost my weight. I'll do a video on that later. But it's very important to make sure that you get up every hour. Do not let your body go to hell, even for 2 days, just because you're trying to write this book. Okay. After you got that, you're going to take a single sheet of paper, not in the composition book. Those composition pages, we need those. But you're going to get a single sheet of paper, and you're going to number this on this sheet from 1 to 28. Okay? The next one. On each line, I want you to write what your chapter will be about in this basic form. Okay? This is a basic form of outlining. I teach more extensive outlining in my classes, but when you're writing a book within 48 hours, you're really going to have to trust your first instinct. So, chapter 1, we talk about the girl again. She is sleeping with somebody she met at the bar the day before. She wants love. Remember, that's her goal. She's sleeping at the bar the day before. And she's sleeping at the bar. She was at the bar the day before, and she's sleeping with somebody she's met at the bar. This man has sex with her. She ends up finding out that her best friend, who she didn't think about it before, but is getting married. So I'm going to write that first thing so you can get an introduction of what the character is, because in those very first pages from 1 to 20, you want to get an introduction to what your character is about. You want to get an introduction to what the world is before the big change. So what I will generally do is make sure that I do in them earlier chapters, I would say from chapters 1. I like 5 or 6 pages per chapter. You can do what you want, but I like 5 or 6 pages per chapter. So in the very first chapter, maybe we can see her having sex. The second chapter, we can see her getting the news that the love of her life is, is about to get married, and that devastates her. You do your chapters how you want. If you want more extensive help, then I'll explain that to you if you join myself and my other students at the Elite Writers Academy. But this will be sufficient enough for you to start. You do that from 1 to 28, because you just want to give yourself a basic outline of what you're writing in this composition book. Is so important. So if you want to talk about writing a book in 48 hours, this is another step. The next thing you do is, you remember that when you're writing your chapters in your composition book, you're going to use 3 pages per composition book. You're going to write in medium form, and you're going to use simple sentences, because at the end, people, this is a rough draft. So you don't want to say, let's say, for instance, the character was drenched, the character left his car didn't have an umbrella and had to walk a half a block up due to all the parking spaces being full to his apartment building. Instead of painting that picture how I would paint that picture and say that he stepped out of his car, the moment he opened the door, he could feel the heavy drops pounding on his shoes. Closing the door behind himself, he walked through the rain, each drop feeling like tiny pieces of hail pounding on his face. I'm just throwing anything out there. And if I'm writing this book to completion, then I want to be as vivid as possible, because who likes to get drenched on? So I want to paint that, because it could be related to a character's trait. In the composition book, you're going to write, he stepped out of the car and walked into the house angry he was wet. Because you're making simple sentences, because when you transfer this composition book to your Word draft, this is when you paint a picture. Never underestimate the power of a first draft, because when you're done, this is what it's going to be. But most people, 98% of people who don't finish a book, is because they don't have their first draft. So respect this power. You're still writing your book within 48 hours. Trust me. Okay. So remember, you're using 3 pages per chapter in simple sentences. The next thing you want to do is remember that when a chapter opens on a positive note, have it end on a negative note. So let's say in the example we just gave, where he stepped outside and he was drenched, and we know he hates being drenched. We can hear him being angry when he goes into the house. Then at the end of that, chapter, the end of the 3 pages, have something good happening, because what you want is a wave that goes up and down. Doing an outline is a little bit more extensive than that, but this will definitely suffice by starting on a positive note, ending on a negative note. For each chapter, if the first chapter starts on a positive note and ends on a negative note, the next chapter needs to start on a negative note and ends on a positive note. So it goes up and down, up and down, up and down when you're talking about writing a book within 48 hours. And this is very important. When you're writing your chapters, outside of making sure you use simple sentences, you're going to use dialogue and action mainly. So write the dialogue. For instance, he's in the house. He stepped outside of his car. We already said he stepped out of his car. He got wet. He was mad. Now he's in the house. Put put into paragraphs or into open colons or whatever. He described the house later. Just put a little note for yourself right there, because you're not going to give that much description unless it's important. Let's say he stepped out of his car and then went into his house and he had blood on his shirt. Normally, a description you can wait until later. But that could be a very important clue that we need to address now. So in that instance, you want to make sure you describe what that looks like. But if it's just basic description to show his house and how things look, just put a note. Describe how his house looks later. And then focus on only dialogue and action. Dialogue and action is going to make up the majority of your pages or your composition book, which is fine. You want always to be moving forward. Sometimes when we do too much description and exposition, we fill it up with so much foolishness that we don't have a story, and people get annoyed. So by doing this process, you're going to get the meat of your book done. And that's how you write a book in 48 hours. It can be done, people. I've done it many times. You can do this in the beginning if you feel as though you need, to do it quickly, just to get that very first draft. Once you do that, you take that composition book, give yourself some few days, because trust me, even though it's only 2 days, you're going to feel it. So give yourself a couple of days to unwind. Record any note or any idea that you have that comes later. Sometimes you get ideas later. Don't let those ideas go. Record them in some note app on your phone, or even on a composition book or Post-it pads. But make sure you record all of your ideas, because they will help you later when you're talking about transferring that document from your composition book to your word processing. But give yourself some time to unwind. You've just written a book in 48 hours. People, it can be done. I hope this helps, and I will be back soon. I'm T Styles. I'm out.